I'm told that some consideration is being given to putting a Marine force of perhaps 2,000 on the ground in Israel. We'll see whether or not that happens. Obviously, 2,000 Marines on the ground in Israel guarantees that somebody's going to get killed if you go to war with Hezbollah and Iran. It's going to be impossible to avoid having something fall on you. But it's not going to make a great deal of difference to the outcome on the ground. Let's be frank, the numbers are just too small. So I don't know, but I think air and missile power, that's where we're headed. And we've got probably as much as we can load onto any of the platforms, the Aegis cruisers, destroyers, plus the aircraft carriers. And we're prepared to fight. And we will go in and we will attack shoulder to shoulder with the Israelis. And we will end up at war with, I suspect, most of the Middle East. And I think we're probably going to end up dealing with the fallout here at home inside the United States, because we've got these open borders. We don't know who's in the country. I think we do have an inkling of what's in the country. And I think from the standpoint of the people running the administration and the government, they might think this is a great thing. You know, if we can drag the American people in the United States into a permanent state of conflict with everyone in the region, that's good for Israel. The Israeli end state is Greater Israel, as a minimum what we described earlier, and they think that's achievable. That may be. I don't know. I have my doubts, but that's their firm conviction. No one is interested in taking and holding anything, least of all Americans. There's nothing to take and hold that's of any real value to us. I think the interest is in destroying Iran, not holding it, not utilizing it or exploiting it, but destroying it.
Right, but
Iran is a large country.
We can't destroy Iran, right? I mean, we can cause lots of damage, but we can't destroy it just with air and missile power, right?
Well, you can do it. You can do an awful lot of damage. You have to look at where the population of Iran is actually concentrated. Much of Iran is desert and mountain, where there frankly isn't much. It's an area larger than Western Europe. So look at where the 79 million Iranians live. It's not very difficult to destroy their water supply, destroy their power grid, destroy ultimately over time their armed forces. That can be done. Now, it's not going to be easy. They're going to fight back, and they have some capability now that they did not years ago. And I'm talking about their ability to reach out and touch us, to attack our 26 bases in the region and kill Americans. There's no doubt about it. But you can do so much damage that you create another wave of refugees and migrants that start going where? Well, they'll pour into Turkey. They're going to go north. They're going to try and go into Europe. They're not going to sit there and be destroyed, starve to death, or end up dying for lack of water. I mean, you can inflict those kinds of damages. You don't need to go into the country. And I think the Air Force is probably, and the Navy is salivating at the prospect, because that's what they've always theorized could be done. You can win a war without any ground force. Well, if your only goal is destruction and murder, they have a point, because there's no reason why we would want to intervene on the ground in Iran. There's nothing there for us. Why are we doing it? So we are essentially extending the range and capability of Israeli striking power, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and so forth. That's what we're doing. And that can do a lot of damage. Now, we haven't discussed who else may object to the total destruction of the Iranian state and the mass destruction of its people. There are other states out there that are not going to be particularly excited about that. Clearly, the Pakistanis are not going to be excited. I don't think India will be excited by it. I know the Russians are going to be horrified if that happens. And again, we come back to Turkey. Turks aren't going to like it. If you go to Northeast Asia, it's not just the Chinese who want access to the Straits of Hormuz, which would likely be closed. It's also Japan, Korea, a number of other states in the region that depend on access to those fossil fuels. In other words, this has global impact. The impact is not just in the region, it's global, and it's going to be economic, it's going to be political and military. And at some point, we may discover that we're up against far, far more adversaries and opponents than we reckoned would be the case.
Okay.
Again, and so you got to distinguish the desired end state, which is Greater Israel, from what is possibly going to happen that's very different from that end state. Does that make sense?
There's the potential incursion into Lebanon against Hezbollah by Israel, but then there's also the potential that this could escalate to include Iran. I want to look at those separately. So first of all, just talk about from the military perspective, is for the IDF, after having fought almost 10 months of war now in the Gaza Strip, do they have the capacity and the ammunition supplies, by the way, to launch an incursion into southern Lebanon, which, by all accounts, the Hezbollah has been basically preparing for since 2007, 2008 for this kind of conflict?
Well, I think the Israelis certainly have the ammunition they need. We've provided, almost without question, anything they asked for. So I don't think there's a shortage on the ammunition side. Now, the ground force, as you know, is much like a large Army National Guard. You have very competent, exceptionally professional people at the top who know what they're doing. But once you get down below the lieutenant colonel and below level, you're running into large numbers of people who are effectively reservists or guardsmen. They are not extraordinarily well trained, although I'm sure they've gotten a lot of good training and experience in over the last 10 months. They've taken a number of casualties. I've seen all sorts of figures, something like 70,000 casualties, 4,000 or 5,000 dead. I have no idea because, as we know, the first casualty in war is always the truth. Neither the Israelis nor anybody else involved in this is willing to tell anybody the truth. So we don't know. But I think we can say with some certainty that the ground force has been stretched. But keep something in mind. The Israelis see this as primarily an air and missile campaign with a ground force that will go in to mop up. And I'm talking specifically about Hezbollah. We are also viewing this as an air and missile campaign. And that, if for no other reason, because we don't have much to send in terms of ground forces. So
I want to look at that. You're talking about the missile forces. One of the things that seemed evident from I think it was June strike when Iran sent 350 missiles and drones, and the Iron Dome allegedly, anyway, knocked out 95% or something like that. But it was in analysis afterwards. We had Professor Ted Postel on, who said when you look at it, actually many of the missiles were not intercepted, and many of those that were designed to be shot down to try to avoid escalation. But he said that if Iran had actually wanted to harm Israel, they could have picked a lot different targets and caused a lot more damage. And Hezbollah, number one, the time of flight now is far less than they would have, and they have more of these missiles. There's some suggestion that the Iron Dome may not be very effective at all, and Israel could be seriously harmed by the Hezbollah missiles.
Well, the Iron Dome has never performed to the level as advertised. 90+% intercepts, that's always been nonsense. So no, they're getting something in the neighborhood of 50 to 60% of what's out there. But keep in mind that everyone's missile arsenal or stocks are designed to exhaust the air defense capability. So you can run the Israelis, and for that matter us, out of anti-missile missiles very quickly. It doesn't take very long. And we are not disposing over hot manufacturing lines or building missiles and rockets hand over fist on a daily basis. So we have limited supplies. The Iranians and the Shiites in Hezbollah are in a different position. What we don't know is how this will begin. I think it's pretty obvious that you're going to get a major war in the region. That's unfortunate. A lot of us have tried very hard to persuade everyone not to go down this road, but I think Mr. Netanyahu will. As a result, I think there will be an attack on Hezbollah by Israel. Now, bear in mind, you've got Lloyd Austin saying we're going to help them if they're attacked. Well, they're already under attack. And the Israeli attitude is that we're the permanent victims in the region, so whatever we do is defense anyway.
Yeah.
So that's a foregone conclusion. What kind of assistance are we going to provide other than logistical and munitions? We are going to provide as much air and naval power as we can mobilize. And that will be directed wherever the Israelis, frankly, urge us to go. Now, we're obviously prepared to attack Iran. If we see evidence that the Iranians are going to join in this fight, we've got target overlays. We're definitely ready to go. the question is what happens with Hezbollah. And, I've said from the beginning that I think the Israelis know that the Hezbollah fight is an existential one. And the only way to win that is to pulverize Hezbollah with everything they've got. And that may include tactical nuclear weapons.
Okay, now I want to look at it from a slightly different perspective. So our country, our choice. I know you're also very interested in the U.S. Constitution, following the rule of law within our own country, etc. When I hear Austin categorically saying, not even the president, but the Secretary of Defense saying, yes, we're going to help Israel fight if they get into a war. Where did the Congress ever authorize the United States to get into war? Because what you just described right before I brought this question up is something that could potentially expand into target sets in Iran. And that, by definition, is a war. And how can we get into something like this if it's not authorized by Congress in the U.S. Constitution?
Well, as we know, Washington is donor-occupied territory. Everybody who clapped vigorously for Mr. Netanyahu has been the beneficiary of the Israel lobby's largesse. I mean, if you go back and look at their campaigns and look at who pours money into their political action committees and helps them stay in office, the lobby has a big role in that. So do the pharmaceuticals, so do the defense industries. So Congress really isn't responding to the American people. The Constitution is a wonderful document, but I don't think anybody's paid much attention to it for a very long time. So we are living in, I'm afraid, a post-constitutional environment. This is one of the reasons that, we talk about where do we put our emphasis, because we can't fight every battle. And at Our Country, Our Choice, we talk all the time about the criticality of the Bill of Rights. And we have to fight to the bitter end to preserve those. Those are also under attack because those are frequently inconvenient. We've already seen legislation passed creating special categories of Americans that deserve more protection than others. And we've also seen attempts to shut down free speech that doesn't suit the majority that happens to be in power at the moment. So these are big problems. They're all bound up together. But the truth of the matter is, Americans, when I say Americans, I always caveat that by saying, well, who are the Americans? I mean, you and I are Americans. We're people that just say, if you ask us on the street, what are you? I say, I'm an American. I don't say I'm something else an American. I don't say I'm an American and then something else. I just say, hey, I'm an American. That's it, just an American. Now, those people who are just Americans have really not engaged. They've got to get engaged. So if you don't signal to people on the Hill that in theory represents you, that you are utterly opposed to this madness, well, then the madness is going to happen. And you have yourself to thank for it. And right now we've got a lot of people that are either not paying attention or have foolishly signed on for the nonsense.